Hi y'all! So if you've been following me on Tumblr for a while, you probably know that sometimes I answer questions or discuss topics that I think are important via videos. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video and talk about just myself and my story, because a lot of questions have been asked about that in the past, and I figured making a video about it was a little more personal than just typing something up. And also because I think I tend to want to hold back my story a lot of the time because of the way people react to it, or the way some people react to it. Some people have great responses, but some people get kind of judgy and try to make me feel ashamed or like make me stop talking about it. And I think speaking up is empowering because of that. And I'm going to do something a bit different with it and post it on Facebook and make it public instead of just private for Tumblr people, because I think just making it private like that kind of adds to that shame and secrecy around my story, and I don't want that anymore. So if you're someone who's watching this on Facebook, who maybe just knows me in real life or knows my family or something, I guess hi, thank you for watching, first of all. And second of all, I know for a lot of you that know my family, this is hard stuff to believe, and for a lot of you who know me, I post about it a lot, but I think it's different to hear me saying it in my own voice. And I think I'm going to give more detail than I normally do. So just be prepared for that. And if you don't believe me and you don't like what I have to say and don't want to hear it, there's this great thing called the unfriend button. Feel free to hit it. I will not be upset. If you don't like what I have to say, that's up to you, and we don't have to talk about it. You can unfriend me. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so this is my 10th take of this video because I'm shaky and talking way too fast and stumbling over my words because it's hard stuff to talk about. So yeah. So I was born into a family, the Newmans, that they're great actors, but inside, they acted like great people, and we were all this happy, perfect family, but beneath all that, it was not very nice. It was not perfect at all. It was actually abusive, and there was a lot of mental illness and a lot of issues that nobody else could see. And when I was little, things were okay. My parents, I'm not going to go into much detail about their own childhoods and their upbringing and all that stuff because I feel like that's their story to tell. But we'll start from the point when I was 3, because that's what I remember. I don't remember anything before that. But when I was 3, we lived in Puyallup, and my mom was very mentally ill. She had an eating disorder and very bad depression. She was suicidal. And my dad was fine as far as his mental health goes, but I think he was having a hard time trying to help her with that and not knowing how to do that, and also raise 3 children because I had my older sister and younger sister and me at that point. And their marriage was falling apart, and they were going bankrupt, and so they couldn't keep the house we had and things. And he didn't have a job at that point because he got laid off or something. I don't remember all the details, but it was basically things went to hell, and we ended up moving back to Seattle. And the thing about that move is it changed my entire world, because my parents, from an early age, they did not know how to handle me because they're not great at dealing with emotions. My mom likes to suppress them and be like, oh, I'm strong and tough and I don't need to feel sad and upset. And I think that contributes to her depression, but that's for a psychologist to determine, not me. I think that, so she's like that, and then my dad is kind of, my mom, I think, also has issues with narcissism, and so everything has to be about her all the time. My dad has to go along with her ways or else their marriage falls apart like it almost did in Puyallup. And so he kind of fell into that. And I was very sensitive and emotional, and they didn't know how to handle that. So they ended up being very invalidating and kind of mean to me. And I never had a great relationship with either of my sisters because I was the black sheep of the family. This is hard. Like I said, this is hard stuff to talk about. But, so yeah. But when we lived in Puyallup, I had this kindergarten teacher who was great and really understood me and made me feel loved and safe. And so that made me feel better. I had friends, and I had a big neighborhood with all these parks and other kids to play with, and so I kind of had my own little universe. But when we moved to Seattle, that all changed because I had a teacher I didn't really like that much. I didn't have my friends. I didn't have my big neighborhood with all these places to go explore. I was kind of on my own, and it was terrifying because of the fact that my parents were invalidating, and I didn't really feel like I had a place in the family. So being 7 years old and not knowing how to handle emotions, I began to act out in ways that I'm ashamed to admit today because my parents made me feel apparently this is a normal thing for a child in my situation to do, but my parents made it seem like it was some horrible, awful thing. So I would scream and kick and throw things and break things and say horrible things like, I'm going to take a knife and kill you to my parents. Even though, like, I could never hurt a soul or without feeling awful afterward, I still said those things, and they believed it, and my mom took to calling me, like, the demon child and saying she didn't want me anymore, she didn't want to deal with me, she was going to have people take me away and lock me up, and my dad didn't do anything about it because, like I said, my mom is a narcissist, and everything has to be about her all the time, and so he would just try to help her and take her side, and they would also lock me in my room for hours on end in the dark without anything like blankets or toys or nightlights that made me feel comforted, for like so long. They wouldn't even let me out to use the bathroom or get food or water, and it was really scary, and just yeah, and they would say things like, if your teachers, like, because at that point I had teachers I started to like more, knew how you acted, they wouldn't want you either, and things were just really bad, and it was traumatic for me as a young child to go through that. And as a response, I started to shut down completely. Instead of lashing out when I felt emotional, I would hold it all in and take it out on myself. Like, when I was 7, I started pinching myself really hard, which was, like, my earliest form of self-harm, I think, to make myself calm down and feel like I felt like I needed punishment. So I would pinch my arms until I almost bled, or sometimes did bleed. And I didn't know how to self-soothe other than that, so I did that. And I started suppressing emotion and keeping it all inside, and like telling myself nobody cares about you, like nobody wants you, so just keep it in and be strong and tough like your mom wants you to be like your mom, because that's what she always did, was suppressed everything and kept it inside. And it really started to damage my self-esteem, like. And so another thing is, my parents were obsessed with healthy eating, or more my mom more than my dad. She would be, she obviously had an eating disorder, but she was in denial of having an eating disorder. She would be like, oh, like, it's not healthy to eat fats or carbs or meat or dairy or soy or gluten or all these things. And so she restricted a lot and was very thin. She was is also obsessed with running and being athletic and exercising and being thin and all these things. And so I started putting a lot of weight into my appearance and how much I weighed. Ironic, weight into weight. Sorry. I put a lot of weight on that. So I'd be like, I didn't think I was pretty. I was like, oh, I'm ugly and worthless and nobody wants me, but at least I'm skinny, because I was really skinny as a kid. And then when I got to middle school, I gained a little bit of weight because, you know, I was going through puberty and all that. And that was kind of when my eating disorder started, because I was like, oh my god, I used to be like skinny and that was what I liked about myself. Now I'm not skinny. Like, I was still skinny, but I didn't see it. And so I started trying to lose weight. Like, I became a really elite runner. I barely ate anything. I pretended I had all these food allergies so that I didn't have to touch certain foods and I could really restrict. And I also got really depressed because, you know, I was suppressing all my emotions, and I felt I had all this trauma buried beneath and that was impacting my self-esteem and my relationships, because I didn't trust anybody. Because, you know, if you feel like your own parents are going to break your heart, then why reach out to anyone else? Because if your own parents don't love you enough to take care of you, like, who else will? That was my thinking. I realize now how irrational that is, but that was my thinking at the time. So I developed an eating disorder and depression, and around that time, my older sister was also going through the same thing. Not with my parents having traumatized her the same way, but just having self-esteem issues because of suppressing emotions. And she began to take that on me by being really abusive, like physically violent, like hitting, kicking, shoving, throwing things at me, breaking my things, saying I was worthless and ugly and disgusting and fat and nobody wanted me or loved me and I should kill myself because they would be better off without me, and things like that. And that really started to impact my self-esteem too, because when you hear someone constantly doing these things, saying these things to you, and you have someone constantly being violent, like, how can that not damage you? And my parents didn't do a damn thing about it. They just let her treat me like that, which was also really awful, because I felt like they were supposed to protect me, but they didn't love me enough to do so, and it made me feel even more worthless. And so my depression got worse, and I became suicidal. And at that point, the thing that saved my life was my therapist, who is amazing. Like, I jokingly refer to her as, like, my real mom, because she treats me the way I imagine a real mom would, other than my own biological mother, because she obviously didn't treat me well. And she saved my life, because she was she was like the first person I really opened up to and trusted. And even though at that age, this was like when I was like 15 was when I started seeing her, I didn't tell her about the abuse. We just talked about my eating disorder and general feelings of worthlessness, because I was scared that if I told her about it, she'd think I was worthless too, and that it was my fault, because I was brainwashed to believe it was all my fault. But she saved my life just by making me feel like I had one person who was safe to go to, and one person I had a positive relationship with, and who I could be myself around. And so things with my parents actually got worse when I started seeing that therapist, though, because of the fact that I started acting more like myself and started eating healthier, and I stopped running, and I started expressing emotions and all that, and my parents didn't like it. So my mom she would continue to insult me and judge the way I ate, and my older sister got more abusive, and my younger sister started acting the same way, and it was just awful. So that's kind of how it went for all of high school. Like, I would self-harm, I would use eating disorder behaviors, and like I'd try to go back into recovery, but I'd end up relapsing and go back and forth. I would be really suicidal, and it was awful. But then, senior year of high school, I got really close with some of my teachers, and I made more friends, and I kind of felt like I had more of a reason to live, and it was great because I would stay out of the house for a long time. I didn't really have to deal with the abuse so much, and I had a great therapist, a different great therapist, because I stopped seeing the old one for a while. I'm back with her now, but anyways, so things got better, and then high school ended, and I lost all that support network to some degree. Like, I'm still in contact with a lot of people, but it's not the same when you're not constantly with them. So I lost all of that, and I actually attempted suicide in July because it was just really bad. Like, I was back being at home all the time with an abusive family who made me feel like I wasn't wanted, and all I had was a therapist, which didn't feel like enough because, a therapist can't be there for you constantly. So I attempted suicide, but then my family moved to Texas and things got better because I was living with friends and I didn't have to put up with my parents anymore. Like, I had positive messages being sent to me. I felt like I was building a support network again, and things were good. Until August, when I left for college, when I had so I have PTSD in addition to the eating disorder and depression. I had a relapse with that when I got to college because I lost the support network again, and I got really suicidal again and started self-harming again. And so I ended up having to go back to my parents and live with them in Texas. And that was like the most heartbreaking decision of my life because college was my dream for such a long time that I was always like, I'll finally find a real family in college. I'll finally feel like I'm worthy in college. I'll feel loved and safe and all these things. And I had to leave that behind because I couldn't focus on the schoolwork because I had too much PTSD and depression stuff going on. So I went to my parents in Texas, and at first it was great because my dad was really trying. Like, I don't think he's a bad guy. Like, the issue is my mom is a narcissist, and everything has to be about her. And so, like, he can't really help me because he has to be focused on her. I probably said that earlier in the video, but anyways, that's, like, a really important thing is her narcissism. And the thing in Texas lasted about 2 weeks because after, like, the first week or so, things went downhill because I'm emotional and sensitive, and they're suppressing emotions, and we just clashed, and they ended up sending me back to Seattle. Like, I was planning on going in early October. They bought a ticket for me to leave in September because they just didn't want me there, which really hurts when you think about it. Like, my own parents didn't want me living with them anymore, even though I was in a really bad place. Like, they would just, like, go. And, when I left, my mom was barely speaking to me. She's still barely speaking to me. Like, on holidays, she'll send a quick text, but she won't talk to me outside of that. I'm on pretty good terms with my dad. Like, we still talk, but there's a lot of hurt there because, like, he's never really tried to help me. Like, they stopped paying for treatment and medication. They're not helping me with housing, or anything. Like, I'm staying with friends right now until I can find a place to pay rent. Like, and I have a good job now. But it's really hard to have to pay for everything on my own and make my own way in the world when I'm 19, but that's just the reality of trying to escape an abusive family. You are on your own in the world, and it's terrifying. And it's hard not to, like, start crying when I talk about that, but I don't want to cry in front of the camera. But I do have, in Seattle, a really great support network. Like, I'm back with that first therapist I was seeing freshman year of high school who saved my life, and she's definitely saved my life multiple times since. So I have her, I have those former teachers and close friends, and the family I'm currently living with is great. And so I'm not alone, but it's still hard because I feel kind of in some ways like I'm on my own in the world because I don't have parents that support me. And for people who are watching this who know my parents, or think they know my parents at least, and they're like, what the heck, they were such great people, like, that was really all just an act, because the reality of abusive situations is you honestly normally don't see it. Like, there's a handful of situations where you can tell because there's physical marks on the kid, or there's obvious signs of neglect, but in a lot of situations, the parents do a really great job of acting like nothing's wrong, and the kids don't want to say something's wrong because they think it's their fault, and they don't want people to know what's going on because they think people will hate them. And that's just how it is. And yeah, like all of what I said just now is the truth. Like I don't see why anyone could, I mean, I do see why people would want me to be lying, because then it wouldn't be true and they could stay in their little bubble of like, the Newmans are a perfect family, and I wasn't, blind to this horrible thing that was happening for 19 years. But the reality is, like, if you thought my family was great, you were blind to something, and it's not your fault. It's because we acted like it was fine. But you were blind to something that was happening for 19 years, and they're not great people. Like, I'm sure they're not bad people deep down inside, but they have a lot of issues, and they've done some awful things. And that's just the reality. Like, I wouldn't lie because people think I lie to get attention, or because I'm, like, mad and trying to get revenge on my family. But, like, by being honest about what's going on, I've lost pretty much everything. Like, I lost funding for college. I lost a place to live, really. I lost my family. Like, I don't get why I would want to lose those things. But I am gaining empowerment and freedom and speaking up about what happened, so that's why I'm doing it. So, yeah, I guess, like, to finish this up, even though I'm in a really difficult financial situation and things are hard because I don't really have a family anymore and I'm kind of on my own, like, I'm more in recovery from my eating disorder and depression and PTSD than I've ever been before. I'm happier than I've ever been before. I love my job. I'm actually learning to love life, and I'm not, like, super suicidal or self-harming anymore or starving myself or any of that shit. So, like, I'm doing better now that I've kind of become free from all of it. So, yeah, like, I've been through hell for, like, 18, 19 years, but I'm getting through it, and I'm doing better now. And so my story is not going to have a tragic ending. Like, I'm actually planning on writing an autobiography someday. Like, I'm working on it a little bit now. And my goal is to make it have a happy ending. And I think I get to choose that for myself. Because, like, yeah, bad stuff happened to me, but I get to choose how I react to it and how I overcome it. And I think I'm choosing not to let it get me down anymore. I'm choosing to speak up about it and hopefully empower others. So, like, if anyone else is in a situation like I was in, there is hope, and it does get better, because look at me, I got out of it. Like, nobody can hurt me now. Sure, there's emotional scars, but those will heal with time. So, yeah, and I'm always here for any of you who need help and who need encouragement to get through it and to break free to the other side of abuse, because you're not alone, and it's not your fault. And to anyone who watched this, thank you, and feel free to follow or leave comments below if you want to, or whatever. And, yeah, have a great night.